Yo, what's good, Knicks Nation? Welcome back to another Game of the Week preview. You already know what it is. We were off for a little bit of time. We had the Chicago Bulls yesterday. I'm recording this, though, on Wednesday, so I'm saying yesterday because when you see this, we'll have played the Chicago Bulls, and who do we have next but the Cleveland Cavaliers? And so, another big test, another chance to see what the Knicks are capable of doing, and who better to preview this game with me, none other than my guy, Evan Dammerel. He covers the Cleveland Cavaliers for Down Euclid. So make sure to go check out his newsletter. He does a phenomenal job over there. So make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. All right, man. Big matchup tomorrow, Evan. Big matchup. Sure. How are you doing, though? How are you feeling?
Good. It's been I'm excited for basketball to be back. I think it's been a little bit of a nice break, I think, for everyone whenever it comes to covering this team, whether it's podcasting, writing, you name it. But the All-Star break kind of, wet my whistle a little bit. I was not surprised by the low viewership numbers, but hey, what are you going to do? But it's time for some real basketball. I know, like you said, the Knicks are playing the Bulls and the Cavs are playing the Nets. So both of these teams will be coming off a second game of the back-to-back at Rocket Mortgage. Well, sorry, not Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse anymore, Rocket Arena. And it will be a very interesting matchup. You and I were kind of chopping it up right before we started recording, and that it's going to be a test for both these squads.
Absolutely. It's going to be a big test. I mean, you talked about it. We talked about it, I should say. You said Cavs have difficulty playing against teams that are in the top four in either conference. The Knicks have not defeated a top team in their conference, whether it be Cavs or Celtics, and they have not beaten the OKC Thunder. And so this will be a good test for both teams where, rubber meets the road. Who's going to win in this matchup where both teams struggle against top tier opponents? So we'll see how all that shakes out on Friday. But Evan, I got a question. I know you're a big NBA aficionado such as myself. What has been your thoughts about the Knicks so far this season?
See, that's a good question, just because I think New York really does have a case to be considered a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference, but the term legitimate contender only goes so far just because no one's knocked off the Boston Celtics yet. Like, yeah, the Cavs are 1-1 against Boston this year, but the latest loss to Boston was certainly humbling, and Cavs fans will point to like Dean Wade not being available, et cetera, et cetera. But like, you look at the New Yorks of the world, you look at the Clevelands. I think maybe even Indiana as a team that can give folks some problems depending on the matchup. But like, come playoff time, it does matter who's healthiest. But like, the Knicks are phenomenal offensively. They are not super surprisingly, just because some of the personnel and everything. But it's a Tibbs team, but they are below average in defensive rating. But like, top 5 in net rating. They are, they play at a slower pace, but they are just a fun team. And I think Jalen Brunson being heliocentric just really changes a lot of the trajectory for them still. And I am such a huge fan of the Karl-Anthony Towns edition for New York. And I watched the Cavs play the Timberwolves recently. And I mean, no disrespect to Julius Randle, but it makes you just wonder why, other than, dodging the luxury tax. But it's not my problem. I'm not a billionaire.
we are not paid millions of dollars to make these high pressure decisions, although I wouldn't mind. I would like to see that in my bank account. But, you question, why did they make the move outside of just the financial reasons? I don't know, man. Only time will tell. But for the New York Knicks, it's looking great so far. And I think, when you look at why they made the trade, to keep it real, Minnesota has never had a good team as such as the Knicks right now. So, one, seeing Cat being on the best team he's ever been on, he's now thriving, right? Julius being on a place where limited in spacing, he's not able to succeed as much. So, it works out for the New York Knicks. Not really caring what the Minnesota Timberwolves got to do moving forward, but for the Knicks, everything looks good. And, you talked about Brunson being heliocentric, and, it's interesting that you say that because Karl-Anthony Towns, man, I mean, he's up there. He's, I think, number 3 right now in MVP voting. Brunson not too far. I believe he's 7th on that chart. And so you say that Brunson, it's like Brunson's team and all of that, but yet, according to like other pundits, they're seeing Cat and what he's doing out there. And I would actually kind of push back saying it's not really heliocentric because Cat is out there putting up his numbers, showing he'd be a dominant force in the paint. And really where you see Brunson attack, sure, he can do it at any point throughout any part of the game, but he's really stepped into this playmaker role and facilitator role, allowing guys really to get in a rhythm. And when it calls for him to turn up the dial and really just put his mark on any game, he's capable of doing so. But Cat, man, he's getting just as much as of the touches as Jalen Brunson is out there. So that I just gotta just like, say that for the Knicks fans because they'll
No,
hear heliocentric and they'll be like, because when I hear heliocentric, I think like James Harden, Houston
oh yeah,
Rockets. Like that's what I'm thinking of. You know what I mean?
or even LeBron at any team at this point. But
Sure.
uh, well, maybe not now with Luca. Still weird to say out loud, but no, I do agree. Like I think Cat is just the perfect complement to this team, and I don't want to discredit what he's doing this season. Like he is putting up MVP caliber numbers. Like he is having the best season of his career. The Knicks struck gold getting him and Mikal Bridges because we'll talk about this upcoming game between the Cavs and the Knicks in a little bit here. But like this is back when the last time those two teams played, everyone was concerned Mikal Bridges' jump shot didn't work anymore. And so now it's everything's starting to click for New York. Like they are just so dominant offensively. Cat, again, having the best season of his career, as you noted, is great. But when I say heliocentric, and like it's Brunson's team, I think it's a similar situation to like where Donovan Mitchell's at, where
Mm.
Kenny Atkinson had to sit down and have a hard talk with him this offseason, leading into this season and say, like, hey, I want to go 10, 11 players deep into our rotation. I think we can really rely on our depth so we don't run you into the ground or run the other guys into the ground. And you've seen a lot of games throughout the season for the Cavs where it's a bit of a collective effort. And maybe in New York's case, it could be Mikal Bridges, it could be Karl Anthony Towns more often than not most nights. But like you said, and it's what Donovan Mitchell does too. When the Knicks need a bucket or they need a guy to kind of put the team on his back and just carry them across the finish line, Jalen's more uncomfortable than doing that. And so is Donovan in that case. And I think it's just an interesting parallel between these two teams where you just find the perfect complement for your squad and Cat, and he just responds in kind with like one of the best seasons, if not the best season I've seen in a really long time, especially for just a big man in general. Like other than Jokic, like this has just been really fun to watch. If there's like an Eastern Conference, I don't want to say equivalent, but a dominant of a force.
For sure. Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Get him beat out of here, man. Get him beat out of here after the dirty play, man. I don't even have to
Well,
talk
he's already
about.
out of there. So
Yeah, he's already out of there. Talk about karma. I won't go down there though. I won't kick the Philly fans too low because they're already in the dirt. All right, let's talk about your team though,
sure.
because stellar, man. I mean, prior to the season even starting, pundits were like, it's Boston, then New York, right? It was always Boston, then New York, and then they even had Philadelphia, which that didn't make sense to me. I mean, the entire between Joel Embiid, PG, and I'm like, those two guys never stay healthy. I don't know how they could be third. But Cleveland came out of nowhere, man, and now number one in the East, having a dominant season. What has been your thoughts on your team so far?
If you had told me at the beginning of the season they'd start the year 15-0, and frankly, losing kind of became a surprise, and how routine winning has become for this team, I would have said I don't believe it. Like they are the team that ran it back. I was one of the doubters when it came to this Cavs team because the Celtics, again, I mentioned at the top, until somebody knocks them off, they're the best team in the East, the best team in the NBA. They're a very hard puzzle to solve, clearly, for a lot of teams defensively and offensively. New York makes a huge power move by getting Bridges and Cat. Like can't deny that. Like that has a lot of splash to it and a lot of just appeal, but also like on paper just makes a lot of sense because it's a fundamentally sound team that just added two superstars, or at least in Bridges' case, like a very high end role player, like a very compliment, a tier below superstar, a tier below star. But either way, and then like you said, Philly, I understand the hype. You're hoping that the Olympic situation was a fluke with Embiid. Unfortunately, it's not, just because like you never want to wish ill on a guy getting hurt. But like you said, the Sixers can't stay healthy. And I was high on Tyrese Maxey too, just because I'm like, okay, this is a dude who is a stud. I think he kind of proved my doubt where he was like the equivalent of a Malcolm Brogdon back when Chris Middleton was healthy for the Bucks, and
Mhm.
Giannis was doing Giannis things, but like Brogdon was like the third guy who took the benefit of defenses having to pay attention to Chris and Giannis. But you just keep working down the list. Even like the Bucks with Dame and Giannis too. Like they have a full year. They have training camp with Doc. Like the Cavs did certainly come out of nowhere, and I think the fact that they made it look so clinical and so routine really took me aback. And then it just kind of became the norm. I think the fact that they remained grounded in the fact that, like, hey, they are making NBA history, but who cares? It's one game at a time. We're living or dying by it. And I was very surprised to see how they responded with the fact that Max Strus missed the better part of the beginning of the season with a high ankle sprain, which was a hip bruise, I want to say, during training camp. And then he stepped on a trainer's foot during rehab, and that was a whole mess. And
Mm.
he's still working his way back in the lineup now. But yeah, no, this team has been phenomenal. And I had told folks on whatever I did, like season previews or early just initial takeaways. I'm like, okay, this is a team that probably at best could make the conference finals. Like, I think if you got that, like, you just wipe your hands and say, okay, this is a good year. But with how they've moved and the move they made at the deadline to get DeAndre Hunter, and the way at least President of Basketball Operations Kobe Altman put it, like, this is a team that could have the chance to make the NBA Finals, and not just make the NBA Finals, but possibly be in play for a title, just with how everything is falling into place. Whether it's Mitchell, like I mentioned before, taking a backseat role at times, Darius Garland kind of going out for blood and playing for revenge, as he would like to call it, or Evan Mobley finally having that leap that everyone was hoping he'd have. Like, everything just kind of keeps falling into place. And Kenny Atkinson, and credit where credit's due, he is an offensive savant, and I think him being very smart in the fact that, like, this is a very good defensive team. He's just going to do some small minor tweaks and not really try and reinvent the wheel. Really did a lot, and I'm very fascinated to see how they look coming out of the All Star break, just because historically speaking, like, they're a team that does not do well since Evan Mobley's at least been on the roster coming out of the All Star break, and if they come out like they did at the beginning of the season, I'm going to be even more bullish on their chances come playoff time.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another game of the week preview. With me on the other side is my guy, Evan Damrow. You can find him over at Down Euclid. All right. Make sure to check out his newsletter. He does a great job covering the Cleveland Cavaliers over there. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Now, it's interesting that you brought up Kenny Atkinson. And I know some Knicks fans out there, especially because they're divided on Tom Thibodeau. They're punching air right now, Evan. They're punching air because Kenny Atkinson was probably up there as probably like one of the top two, if not three options for who some fans wanted to be the next coach after what he did in Brooklyn. We know what he did with D'Angelo Russell, Jared Allen. You could talk about that entire Joe Harris. You could talk about that entire team, right? And people just saw him as like a culture builder. They saw that he had some genius behind there. Obviously, he went down a different coaching path, different career path in order to get back to head coaching career. But now he's coaching the Cleveland Cavaliers after they get rid of Bickerstaff. And what do you see? First year, as you already mentioned, this team is rolling. Is he been the key to unlock everything? Is that it? They just needed a new head coach?
I don't want to say they need a new head coach, because in JB's exit, Kenny did give a lot of praise, gave JB his flowers for building the fundamentals of this team defensively, kind of building and establishing this culture. He was kind of the new kid at school and coming into this, and I mean, had one of the busiest off seasons I ever heard. I mean, literally moments after France lost to Team USA in the gold medal game during the Paris Olympics, he took a straight overnight flight to New Haven, Connecticut, where Donovan Mitchell lives, and spends his offseason, and met with Mitchell personally one-on-one. And then he met with Allen one-on-one, or this order is incorrect. And then he met with Mobley, Garland, and worked his way down the roster, just kind of have a clear understanding of what he envisions using them for, what he kind of hopes he wants to utilize them with this season. And I've asked him before, like, even during the dominant start, I'm like, are you surprised you started X and O? And we ended at 15-0. And he's like, yeah, I am. He's just like, we probably should have lost two or three of these games. There's games we weren't good, we weren't great, but you had mentioned, like, he is a culture builder. I think he is an offensive genius in a sense where, like, it's kind of like the no duh things, where when Karis LeVert was on this roster, you'd have a lineup of Garland, Mitchell, and LeVert on the floor. But he's like, okay, well, I don't want two of my three ball handlers just standing there watching the other one dribble, dribble, dribble. Let's just keep the ball moving. Let's get the bigs involved. Let's kind of just keep movement and cutting and slashing and getting a whole buy-in from the team on his offensive fundamentals and principles. And I think that's a huge thing. And also, his different path, he took something very interesting, and it's a quote that stuck with me a lot lately. This is something he said right before the All-Star break, when he was an assistant coach with the Clippers and kind of learning the ropes under Ty Lue. Like, I think it was really helpful, the fact of, like, learning how to manage egos, because that was when James Harden, Kawhi, Paul George were on a roster. He same thing in Golden State under Steve Kerr. He learned how to manage different personalities, especially when there's high expectations with, like, Steph, Clay, Draymond, and he took a lot of examples from it. But something he shared is just like, my objective is to make a playoff adjustment every single day. So, like, he's going to try something new, whether it's in practice or a game. And if either it works or it doesn't, and they figure it out and say, like, can this be a wrinkle that we can throw at a team? come playoff time, just because, a lot of coaches do keep their cards close to their vest. They play things very vanilla, but like the Cavs do things a little differently. Like they don't have a consistent starting small forward. I mean, maybe that changes once Atkinson gets a better feel for DeAndre Hunter, but it's been a rotating door between Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, Max Strus. Hunter started a few games. Shoot, even Sam Merrill at points started games at the three for the Cavs. Like Atkinson just kind of remains dynamic. I think the fact that he's able to kind of just pull the right levers and figure out how things do and don't work. And the fact that like the Cavs have faced a little bit of bumps of adversity just because injuries kind of and the fatigue of playing such like a breakneck start to the year kind of took their toll. But I have been pleasantly surprised. I would say a lot of it is the coach, but I also just think a lot of it too is like getting the collective buy-in from the players right away. And the fact that these guys do have on-court camaraderie and chemistry and in the locker room as well kind of makes this transition a little less awkward and a little less clunky for everyone. It's not like you're just now trading for Donovan Mitchell and hiring a new coach at the same time. You kind of did the first big step, which is bringing in Mitchell, the superstar. So these guys get a feel for one another. And then you bring in Atkinson, who's been watching this team for quite a bit now during his time with the Clippers or the Warriors and kind of just taking notes and things. And that's how he kind of sold himself really on, at least after the fact, we learned that how he sold himself on Dan Gilbert and Kobe Altman on just the coaching process in general. How he can kind of do things a little bit differently. And it's a lot of it's embracing defense and letting the defense dictate their offense and just playing faster. I think it's a lot of like those no duh things, but just getting the players to buy into it and not play into those bad habits that have kind of played them in the past has been really, really great for them. So it's a two-way street. It's coaching and it's players. And I know it's kind of a weak answer, but it's just like kind of things are just kind of falling into place almost too perfectly at times for this team. And it's like hard to believe.
Look, man, I don't believe in it being a weak answer. Just like in life, there's never just one sole thing that is the answer for anything. Very rarely is that ever the case, right? It's usually a multitude of things going into one pot, and then next thing you know, you get this perfect recipe that creates this perfect dish, and that's what has happened for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I know people are listening to this right now, and they're probably thinking for Tom Tittle because look, I'm sure you guys had your gripes with JB Bickerstaff, right? And what he
Mm-hmm.
could have done better and how he could have coached the Cavs better. And people have that same gripe with Tom Thibodeau. And look, I think things where you look at, you know, who's capable of bringing the most out of players, that's something that you got to look at first, right? And, you know, it's going to be a big test for Tom Thibodeau because now you got essentially the roster for the next 3 to 4 years, and you got to get over a certain hump, which is being bounced out in the second round. All right, we did it prior to. We thought we needed a better roster. Now you got the better roster. Obviously, there's still some more tweaks to come along, but it's kind of in that same realm that you talked about with moving on from Bickerstaff to now getting Atkinson, where it's like this evaluation period and who's going to be the next, coach to come in. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Teams could always impress and change things up, but I know fans are listening to that right now and saying, that's what we want, man. That's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you gotta wait, man. You gotta let things cook and things develop, man. And it's hard to always give one, like I said, one credit to somebody. Like it's everyone just a collective buy-in. There has to be a collective buy-in for things to transpire. And I'm
Yeah.
just curious when it comes to collective buy-ins because you guys made a big move. You guys got Hunter from the Atlanta Hawks, which pressed the Hawks after having a good season, losing Jalen Johnson. I know that's kind of changed the outlook for the team this season, but still giving up DeAndre Hunter, who was, producing for them. Now he's a Cleveland Cavalier. He has to make adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny Atkinson's got to be able to adjust to incorporating this guy on the fly. What's your thoughts about the trade, and what do you think the outlook is for a Hunter moving forward?
So I was pleasantly surprised that it did cost, I want to say so little for the Cavs, just because you had that chip in Karis LeVert that was an expiring contract, and you had to really think like, how do we want to utilize this? Do we believe we're able to rock the boat enough chemistry wise? And I'll touch more on that in a second. But for me, the cost of Levert, Niang, several second round picks, and the Hawks had to facilitate a trade to move Cody Zeller elsewhere, just make the trade work in the financials and roster spot. But it all worked out nicely. I think on paper, Hunter fits that theoretical void of what a true power forward is in today's NBA. That guy who can play the two, the three, or the four primarily, or like Atkinson has kind of teased the fact that like, oh, they could go super big where Hunter plays the two and they put Mitchell at the one and he kind of plugs and plays and figures things out. And there's a lot of fluidity and creativity you can do with that. But Atkinson admitted it's probably going to take him maybe 10 to 15 games and several practice sessions and shoot arounds and things like that to kind of get a proper feel for DeAndre, which is not an enviable position in the middle of the season, especially when things are kind of clicking so well for you. But my big thing is like the guys are welcoming him in pretty quickly, from what I can tell. Him and Ty Jerome were on the Virginia Cavaliers team that won the national title a couple of years ago. So like they have that connection there, and they talk about how it's always a situation where they wanted to play in the NBA together. He has the same agent as Evan Mobley, so they do a lot of summer runs together too. So there's that off-court familiarity, which helps. But it is a delicate thing. Like George Niang was a loud, boisterous guy who was the voice of the locker room and kind of guy who wasn't afraid to talk trash to an opposing bench if he hits a big shot, or also kind of get in the face of his teammates and call them out on something he sees. And, he's willing to dish it and take it. So that's a little bit of give and take. And then also, Karis LeVert like really integrated himself as the sixth man on this team for the last several seasons, where he's really fleshed out that role. And he's admitted on several occasions, he's like, yeah, in a different situation, I'd probably prefer to be starting. But like for this team, I'm willing to make the sacrifice because these are my guys. I want to go for war for them. And chemistry is delicate. It's a very delicate thing. And that's something that weighed heavily in the decision too, just because the Cavs were the hottest team and remain one of the best teams in basketball throughout the season. You don't want to mess up a good thing. And that's something Kobe Altman admitted that came into the decision of making this trade. But on paper, it makes sense. I think his first game where he had, I think, a double double in terms of just rebounds and just hitting every single shot from the perimeter he took. Like he is a good safety valve in terms of just maybe depending on the lineup, he can kind of be like that third or fourth banana where you have a guy who's either floating on the perimeter or he can just be a connector piece where he keeps the ball moving. I think that's incredibly helpful for this team. And we'll see how it goes. But I have been a fan of the returns so far. I think defensively, he has really stepped it up. I think just the Hawks team being just the Hawks in general being so bad defensively, like it's hard to cover for Trae Young and an aging Clint Capella and just all the weird mismatch pieces they had down in Atlanta. So like Hunter's defense was a little suspect, but his first game against the Timberwolves, I think they held Minnesota to two made field goals in the first quarter, which is like the second best in franchise history, which is pretty nuts when you think about it. Say it so casually like that, but I was a fan of the acquisition. Always was a fan of DeAndre Hunter's game, but I want to see more of the tape of him and just kind of figure out like, okay, how's Atkinson going to utilize him? Because he's mentioned, like I said, a lot of off the wall things like playing Hunter at the 2 or the 3 or the 4. And he's also like, he's a small ball 5. Why not? Let's just try it all, throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. And I think he could be that connector piece for them. And I think he could be a chip that pushes them more towards that championship contention level. But again, we'll also just see like, does this rock the boat enough chemistry wise? It doesn't appear to be the case, but when you get into the dog days of the final weeks of the regular season, you're kind of like eyeing the playoffs at that point. You want to see, can you get these guys to step up and kind of keep them focused, or will we start to see the cracks in the foundation a little bit and maybe have a little bit more red flags come playoff time?
Interesting. So, unlike Shaq, you were familiar with DeAndre Hunter's game. I just want to get that out there. There you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
I was always a guy he kept tabs on. The Kobe Altman admitted on the night of the draft, because Hunter went one pick before Garland to Atlanta. I think Hunter was the guy the Cavs really zeroed in on at that point. But then the
Mm,
Lakers made that trade with the Hawks, and funnily enough, the Timberwolves traded up in the draft to draft Darius Garland and ended up with Jarrett Culver, and we all see how that ended for Jarrett Culver, unfortunately. But it's weird how everything kind of works out in the end. But he's a
so
guy I've
strange.
always just had kept tabs on, and like he's a theoretical guy that makes sense. And plus, he's in his mid 20s and he has 3 years left on his deal. So like you have a little bit of runway to kind of figure out, hey, is this a good fit or is it not? And also like he is a player that is at a premium commodity. Like if it's not working, if you could flip him for something else, I think that is perfectly viable too if you're the Cavs.
It's so funny because I know talking to CP, and I'm sure you talk like to some Knicks fans. I'm not sure if it would be most or whatnot, but Mikal Bridges was was the person that they were eyeing in on during that draft. And sure enough, he's a Knick some way, somehow. I'd say with DeAndre Hunter being a Cav, became a Cav some way and somehow. I got to ask you this. You got DeAndre
Mm-hmm.
Hunter, and I know that you got him for switchability. You're looking at Cleveland, you're looking at the Knicks, you even looking at OKC if that's the potential finals matchup. And the one thing we talk about all those teams is switchability, versatility. Those are very key common terms throughout the league right now. That's what you need to have if you want to go make NBA Finals run. With getting Hunter and his play style, Does this team make it tougher? Make them more tougher. And I'm not talking about like in the, you know, like, oh, they're a tough team to play. I mean physically, because something in this matchup, and this is what I'm going to draw it back to. That playoff matchup, man. We did some game of the week previews then too during that postseason. Physicality was the thing that came
Oh
through,
yeah.
and the Knicks were more physical than the Cavs. Do you think the Cavs have now corrected that issue, or are they still a team that, still when they face an opponent that's very physical, they kind of shy away from it?
I so it's a little tricky because the physicality aspect was a big thing. I think rebounding is just a big thing. It's always just a thing when you face the Knicks, especially now that you have Cat, you have Bridges, you still have Josh Hart, you still have just a team that is fundamentally sound rebounding wise. And I think that's just an issue that's always plagued the Cavs. I think when it came to Evan Mobley, it became a little suspect. I broke down the numbers a while ago. Like before Atkinson became the head coach, like the Cavs were not a good rebounding team when Jared Allen was just not on the floor, which is not great if you're kind of you're kind of like hanging yourself and he's the linchpin to your rebounding success. Like whether he's injured like he was against the Magic last season during the playoffs, or he's getting beat up and bruised by the Knicks 2 seasons before that. Like that's just not a recipe for success. And Kenny Atkinson is kind of just that's something he has made a big adjustment on, is just everybody is going to collectively rebound the basketball, whether it's Allen, whether it's Mo, who's put up astounding numbers rebounding wise this year. Like he's had a couple 20 rebound games, which is, again, like he makes it look so nonchalant just because Jared Allen just doesn't have the flashiest game. But like Evan Mobley's rebounding numbers are up. Donovan Mitchell's rebounding numbers are up. You see Dean Wade crashing the glass even more. Isaac Okoro working the glass, where Atkinson is using Okoro as a 3 on offense and a 4 on defense. And where's more of a position display. Max Strus is a good rebounder too. Like the Cavs have a good collection of pieces, and I think Hunter does fit that niche a little bit too, where he is a bigger body that can help crash the glass or just box somebody out. And I do wonder if physicality will be a factor if these two teams ran into each other, whether it's the second round of the playoffs or possibly the Eastern Conference Finals, depending on how the final standings are, and like that is the deciding factor. Just because the Knicks are and always will be a physical team, sure, like I had mentioned before, like maybe they're not as dominant defensively as they had been in the past, or just like what you'd expect from a Tom Thibodeau team, but I think still like it's going to be a deciding factor no matter what, especially just because it's going to be something on the back of everyone's mind if these two teams meet, because that was the narrative coming out of that flow season is just like, well, Jared Allen became a meme and he's fine with it now, but like it's very infamous where the lights were too bright, and the fact that the Knicks just kind of bullied the Cavs, and Mitchell Robinson just was talking crap I think on his Snapchat story to the Cavs after the game. Like it's just like it's a tough look, and until you kind of excise that ghost, it's going to be hard. And it's the same thing with Boston too. Like they're a very good rebounding team as well. Like Porzingis is a player that just, and Tatum and Brown are all just players that fundamentally give the Cavs troubles because it's either rebounding or it's just the size and versatility and switchability. Like the Cavs have the pieces. It's just, and they're showing signs of improvement there. It's just you can't really get that monkey off your back until you just excise the spirit or the demon that's plaguing you come playoff time when the pressure's at its highest.
For sure. And what's funny enough, though, is that actually, if you look at the stats that's on the regular season, the Cavs are a better rebounding team than the Knicks. Cavs are 13th right now. Knicks are 23. But, Cat, you have Josh Hart. Those are our two big rebounders. And we'll see how this all matches up, man.
Yeah.
I do think that the Knicks are still a more physical team than the Cavs just because their play style. Brunson's a physical player. Josh Hart's a physical player. Cat has shown he can be a physical player. OG is very, tough. The only one that's not really physical is Mikal Bridges in that starting lineup.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy that likes to work off screens. He's like a guy like to use his speed, his agility to get to his spots. So we'll see how it all matches up in this game. I'm truly looking forward to how this all shakes out. But shout out to Knicks Nation, man. Salute to all of you for tuning in for another Game of the Week preview. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. With me on the other side is my guy, Evan Damero. All right. And let me correct myself because I was forgetting one key word in your newsletter. It's Write Down Euclid. My apology, my man.
You're all
Write Down
good.
Euclid. So make sure to go check out Write Down Euclid if you want to go catch some in-depth Cavs coverage. But hey, don't forget, now I got to get to my sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV. Let me tell you about Underdog Fantasy real quick, all right? Underdog, I love using that app, man, because when I'm watching a game, I like to think that I know a little bit more than than what the sports app is thinking. So I like to go out there, put a little money down, create my ticket, and see if I can win. And the cool thing about Underdog is that it doesn't just have to be NBA when you're making a ticket. It'd be a mix and match of all sports. So NFL, even though the season's over, you can do hockey, basketball, baseball is going to be right around the corner. So you can mix and match all those players between 2 to 8 players. That's all you got to do. Choose 2 to 8 players. The more players you choose, the bigger the pot will be in your return. And then all you got to do is just choose higher or lower on any stat. So if, let's say, Jalen Brunson's at 25 and a half, all you got to do is points. Just choose higher or lower if you think Jalen Brunson's going to choose score more than 25 and a half points. And the other cool thing, you got the draft. So if you want to go, go toe to toe and put on your GM hat and see if you're better than your friends, you can totally do that as well. So make sure to use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. All right, Evan, let's wrap this thing up. Let's get into some key stats, my man. Let's get into this matchup right now because this is it, man. I really,
Let's lock in.
you guys got us the first matchup. We were leading, and then next thing you know, took that right away from us. Like, nah, we all good, man. We're gonna take this win. And then there was a bunch of, including myself, frustrated Knicks fans afterwards. Okay, so
Understandable. That was the one game where I'm like, oh, they might lose, and then I'm like, okay, this team's got a little bit of sauce here. Like it was so long ago. It was 4 games into the season for Cleveland, but I'm like that's an impressive win. Like you don't really see a Cavs team in the past respond like that, and they certainly did. And like you said, maybe some miscues on the Knicks side of things. But for the Cavs side of things, I was just like, okay, there's a little bit of something here. Maybe it's not as big of a fluke as I thought at first.
what we're gonna say is that we were very early on in the whole, we got cat bridges, so we're still trying to figure things out. So now we have time. We put some of the things together. There's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more fluidity in this team. Let's see if it all works out. But going to key stats right now, one thing that stands out to me is that both Cleveland and New York are very good in working off of getting points off of turnovers. And so I'm very curious to see how this is going to work out between two teams. For the most part, I think protect the ball pretty well. I mean, Cavs are third right now in the NBA when it comes to protecting the rock at 13.1. And who's fourth right behind them with the same number? The New York Knicks. So, I think this game is going to come down to who's going to limit turnovers and who's going to be able to take advantage of the opponent's turnover. What do you think about that one?
I think that's a great shout, especially coming out of the All-Star break, just because you shouldn't expect players to kind of be on a roll. There's going to be a little bit of clunkiness, awkwardness, just because it's an extended siesta for most of the league. I mean, some a heavy collected players were in San Francisco over the weekend and for the doing their thing, but like it's going to be a little sloppy. It's going to be a little haphazard. And I think it's a great shout too, especially when you noted before the break that the Knicks are just a team that plays physically in general. You have Brunson, you have Hart, you have everyone except Mikal Bridges just playing physical basketball. And like if you either control or limit the turnovers or force the Cavs into miscues and errors, especially maybe as they're still trying to figure out what they can and cannot do with DeAndre Hunter, like this could be an exploitable edge for the Knicks in this matchup just because it could just make a huge difference. I mean, yeah, sure. And that's the other thing too, is just like the Cavs are a very good team at home. Like they're a good team overall. Let's be honest here, but they're a very, very good team at home. And if you're going into a unfriendly environment like Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, just because, as we had mentioned before, the Knicks Cavs series is still weighing on Cleveland's fans' minds. I would think if I ran a poll, most Cleveland fans would say they don't like the Knicks very much just because of what happened in the playoffs a few years ago. But it's going to be hostile. It's going to be unfriendly. They're not going to be thrilled to see the Knicks are in town. And I think if that's a way you can kind of control the narrative, control the noise, and slow things down, it can certainly make the difference. And I think also, just for me, like you had noted the rebounding difference, but if the Knicks are able to control the glass or the Cavs are kind of able to dictate their flow a little bit and not just the rebounding battle in general, but like second chance opportunities. If the Knicks limit second chance opportunities for the Cavs, that could be a huge deciding factor, especially if you're able to maybe dictate the flow a little bit, maybe make the Cavs not play faster. Like in terms of pace, the Cavs are one of the top teams in the league, but the Knicks are one of the slower teams in the league. They're very methodical in their process. They're very methodical in scoring their points. Like it can be a little grimy and ugly at times when they aren't falling, but like if you find a routine and maybe slow the Cavs down or just disrupt their offensive flow, that can be an edge for the Knicks too. Or in the Cavs case, if they try to get New York running, that could disrupt New York's flow quite a bit and just kind of make them a little bit off kilter and off balance and maybe make life a little bit easier for both of these teams, especially in Cleveland's sake, coming back home on a second game of a back-to-back and having to deal with tired legs and also, trying to regain momentum and find your routine and your just, general flow coming out of the All-Star break.
Yeah, and the thing about when you think about when you look at turnovers and just scoring off of turnovers, the first thing that goes into my mind, as you already pointed out, is pace, scoring out in transition. And now as you noted, the Cavs are one of the faster paced teams out there. They like to get the ball, they like to go out there and move.
Hmm.
Knicks, they can, but they like
Yeah.
to be a little bit more methodical, as you mentioned, in their movement. So it's fascinating when I look at these fast break points, according to NBA.com stats, that the Knicks are 15th when it comes to fast break scoring, and the Cavs are 20th. Now, that might just because based on volume, that the faster you
Hmm.
get out there and run, more opportunities you're going to be missing, and the points could probably go down. But this is to me is like that's going to be the back end of it. You get the turnover. Are you going to go out there and score in transition? Are you going to try to get some easy points, or are you going to slow this thing down for the New York Knicks and just work your sets? That's where it's
Yeah.
going to be very interesting what they do.
Oh, I agree. And I also just think on the other side of things too, like another stat I'm just looking at now, and just I was doing the math in my head as you were talking to, like the point differential and points allowed between these teams is pretty razor thin. Like it's a point 0.6 points per game difference between the two. The Cavs allowing 111.9 points per game, New York allowing a 112.5. Like that is very razor thin. And the Cavs are second in scoring the NBA. The Knicks are not too far behind them and fourth in scoring the NBA. Like this is going to be a pace will definitely dictate the flow in this one. Turnovers will definitely dictate the flow in this one. And then like I think that's just going to be the deciding factor. Like in New York, slow this down enough to, close that gap of about 4.3 points per game difference of Cleveland outscoring them. And then just, defensively, like they're more or less allowing the same amount per game. Like that could be the deciding factors, just pace, space, and just turnovers. And it's going to be a fun matchup just because either it's going to be a grimy kind of defensive game at times, or maybe there's a team who can kind of find a little bit of a spell, or it's going to be just an offensive explosion on either end. It's just going to be the last man standing and
Hey,
maybe the last
hey,
guy with the
these two
ball in their
teams.
hands.
Hey, we saw not too long ago. I forget it was 1 or 2 seasons ago, but there was that one matchup where toe to toe, Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson. I think that was 2 seasons ago
That was
before they
fun.
met in the postseason. And I mean, those guys, it was just dynamic. I would not be surprised if we got something like that too. Another key stat for me before we move on to our key matchup. I'm looking at the numbers. Cavs, very good when it comes to uh what is it over here? My apologies. They're very good when it comes to defending against the rim. And
Mm-hmm.
but they're poor when it comes to defending the three. And the Knicks, on the other hand, are pretty average right now. They're in the middle of the pack when it comes to attacking the rim offensively, but they're dominant when it comes to shooting the three. Knicks are also pretty bad when it comes to defending against the three. So I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a 3-point shootout contest between both teams. But I think the place where it's going to be a little difficult is, are the Knicks going to be able to get their points in the paint? You guys
Mm-hmm.
got the Twin Towers over there. As of right now, for injury report, Mitchell Robinson and OG Anunoby did go through contact today, so they're both progressing to get back into the rotation. However, according to Ian Begley today, Josh Hart is dealing with some knee injury. He will not be playing in the game against the Chicago Bulls, but when you're listening to this, that game has already passed, so hopefully he is back for the second night of a back-to-back against the Cleveland Cavaliers, which to my expectation, that's probably what they're saving him for. You want to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
he gets a little bit more rest. Go put him out there against, top competition, see where this team stands. I expect him to be back against the Cavs, and I expect this just to be more of like load management for him, so that way he'll be fresh when he gets to the postseason. So this is going to be the matchup, man. Where offensively, and defensively, where do things shake out? And so I
Yeah.
think this could be a true 3-point contest because both teams solid against protecting the paint.
Yeah.
Both teams struggle against defending the three. And so we'll see how that turns out for tomorrow's game.
Yeah, we'll definitely see how it turns out. You had noted like the Josh Hart shed. I think it's a good one. The Cavs are doing, I would assume, something similar with Dean Wade, where he was ruled out against the Brooklyn Nets. We are, like you had mentioned, talking before these teams play the Knicks against the Bulls or the Cavs against the Nets. But Wade's not playing. Okoro is questionable and dealing with a shoulder injury. Like those are two of your top guys in terms of perimeter defense. And I think that is really altered the trajectory of how the Cavs defend the perimeter too. Like you have Max Strus out there, you're having Evan Mobley kind of do a little bit more defensively. I think you're trying to integrate DeAndre Hunter into doing that as well too, and I think that can change things up quite a bit too. I think Kenny Atkinson kind of encouraging Darius Garland to be a point of attack defender, a guy who's comfortable being a help defender too. Just even if it doesn't work, like if you're something you want him to be comfortable doing. So if he is being picked on defensively, like it's something he's not like flustered by totally. But the 3-point shooting is an interesting thing. Like you look at the percentage, like it is razor thin in terms of, I mean, 1.8% difference between both teams. The Cavs won, New York 5 in terms of just 3-point shooting percentage in the
Wow.
NBA. And like they're both just modern teams with a lot of switchability and a lot of 3-point shooting, and they have the ability to establish just getting rolling in the paint. And I think if you're New York, if Dean Wade is unable to play, that again changes things quite a bit for the Cavs, just because the Cleveland fans like to call him the Jason Tatum stopper. Like he's pretty good against Tatum. Like Dean Wade, for what it's worth, is just good at defending guys on the perimeter. He's a really good help defender, a really good point of attack defender. He's a four that is so comfortable playing the three or defending multiple positions that he's an added luxury when you have a backline of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen already established there. But if you have a guy that can kind of defend and limit that perimeter pressure, it makes things a little easier. But if you're New York and Wade can't go, and they're still trying to figure out Hunter, maybe Hunter doesn't have it going on defense, and maybe it's a little bit more sus than we thought it would be. It could change that quite a bit, and also just make things easier for the Knicks to not only maybe establish a 3-point repertoire on the perimeters, because the Cavs aren't great at defending the three to begin with, but you're also going to be stretching the Cavs more out on defense as well. And I think Cat's going to be a big deciding factor too. Like, do you put Jared Allen on him at times, or do you put Evan Mobley on him at times? Like, Cat's could burn
Big
the Cavs quite a
decisions.
bit from the perimeter. And like, if you're pulling those bigs out of the paint, that opens up the lanes for the rest of the Knicks to drive to the basket, either draw fouls out of contact or just get easier buckets at the rim. Like, it's a weird matchup just because against stretchier big men, like Jared Allen has played well, but it like hasn't been phenomenal at times. And like Evan Mobley has played well too, but like it has been a test for this Cavs, whether it's Porzingis or guys like Cat, or you look at how like Oklahoma City plays. Like I know Chet hasn't been available, but like the Thunder just have so many different guys that can play different positions. Like they're stretching dudes out on the perimeter so much. And ditto for Houston. Like Houston's a team the Cavs struggled against because they had dudes pulling him out, and then you had Sengun just dominating on the interior and drawing contact constantly. And it's a weird, interesting flow that both of these teams can kind of utilize. And I'm just really curious to see how it goes. And like you said, like we both talked about, like it's just a razor thin difference 3-point wise. And I think Cat will be a big X factor in this matchup, especially with how
Mm.
the Cavs defend him and also how the personnel will be available. But obviously, the big matchup in this one is going to be Brunson versus Mitchell. And I think that's always going to be the big matchup whenever these two teams meet, just because a lot of the storylines off the court, and also just when these two guys go against each other, it does result in fireworks one way or another.
There you go. And talk about a segue. Thank you, Evan. Key matchup for tomorrow. Of course, it's going to be one Jalen Brunson against Donovan Mitchell. I mean, come on, man. Both these guys, leaders of their respective teams, both these guys, so dynamic offensively. We've seen what they can do. They can put on a show just by themselves and carry their teams right across the finish line, as you noted earlier in the show. I'm expecting both of them to just go out there and do what they do best, man, which is put up points, you know? And look, I think in this matchup, we could talk about everybody. Cat's going to go get his, I'm going to see, what is it? DeAndre Hunter's going to go get his. Everyone's going to get theirs in this matchup. Um, Darius Garland's going to go get his.
Mm-hmm.
Bridges is going to try to go get his. But it's going to come down to Brunson and Donovan Mitchell, man. It's going to come down to those two big stars. And whoever shows up and just like truly comes down to the it just comes down to the margins,
Yeah,
man. We talked about the stats, we talked about everything between both these guys. Like they both can just score and they can outperform anybody, right? It's going to come down to the margins, like who makes that one or two more shots, who knocks down that one extra free throw. That's where this game's going to be made. Key matchup for tomorrow, none other than Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, man. I'm glad that you gave me the alley oop for this one, man. We got
me
the we
too.
got the D Wade and LeBron James photo on that one, man. Just perfect, perfect pass.
Perfect. And I'm happy to set you up like that. Yeah, like you said, it's gonna be the match of the game, whether it's a one extra 3-point shot or whether it's gonna be a guy drawing contact and getting to the basket. These are the two dudes that when the pressure's heightened, and I would expect this to be a playoff type game, just whether it's the crowd atmosphere because of them not loving the Knicks or just both these teams really, duking it out for the Cavs are number one. They have a target on their back to begin with, and the Knicks are, I wouldn't say, very far away from competing with the Cavs, just because, yeah, you got Boston, you got New York. Like it's going to be a bit of a mix of the top three, especially if the Cavs do lose this matchup and makes things even tighter for Cleveland, just because I was doing the math before we got on and started recording. Like 72% of Cleveland's remaining games this season are against teams that are in the playoff race in the Eastern Conference and the Western
Mm.
Conference. So it's tight sledding for Cleveland coming out of the All-Star break. And yeah, they do that do or die attitude. But like back to this matchup, these are the two guys you want to put the ball in their hands. This is why either team acquired said player, whether it's Brunson for the Knicks or Mitchell for the Cavs, where the pressure's at its highest. Yes, we have our guys who can get their points, whether it's Garland, Mobley, or even Allen for the Cavs, or it's Cat or Bridges, or even Hart, or anybody else for the Knicks. Like, okay, but the pressure's on. We need you to get one more bucket. We need you to go get to the free throw line. Maybe get a guy to foul out for us just because they're in foul trouble and like they're breaking our back a little bit. It just makes life easier for us on the offensive side of the ball. Like these are the dudes that you put the game on their back and you expect them to deliver. And I'm very curious to see like how either responds to it, especially now that like both Mitchell and Brunson have kind of taken a bit of a backseat to their teammates and letting them just cook and do their thing and keeping a little bit more gas in the tank and for the playoffs when it matters most. And also like, hey, if their numbers called, they're more than comfortable doing it. They have not lost a step whatsoever.
And there's some beef, man, because both these
Oh yeah.
two guys were out in the West. Brunson took down the Jazz. Knicks took down the Cavs. There's some beef, man. Both these guys, like, there's going to be showmanship. There's going to be egos a little bit involved in this, man. Both these guys want to go out there and be like, and prove something like Donovan Sure. Like, look, man, we got the number one team in the East. I want to show you what we are about. Jalen Brunson going out there. Look, man, I still own you, man. You have not beaten me yet when it matters most. So it's going to go out there, and that's where it's going to be put on the line. But let's wrap this thing up, man. I'm appreciative of your time. I know I've taken you over a little bit,
Oh, you're fine.
but let's get into this X factor, man. This is where we talk about the key matchups. We can go through the stats. There's usually a player or a few that decide the game. All right, that are not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the superstars. Since you were the guest, I'll let you go first. Who is the Cavaliers X factor?
I want to say Evan Mobley. I am very
Mm.
health not dependent, but I think Evan Mobley is just having such a tremendous season. His first All Star year, back to two-time skills competition winner. I think you cannot discredit that whatsoever. Jokes aside, but just Mobley has been phenomenal, and we talked about Atkinson at the top quite a bit about how like he has done a lot to unlock Evan Mobley and kind of encourage him to take those threes and be a little bit more selfish at times on offense. But like you're seeing it all from Mobley. It's the passing, it's the scoring, it's the 3-point shooting, it's the rebounding, it's the help defense, it's the stuff that you can't really track on a box score or with advanced metrics. It's just with the eye test and everything. But I am again curious how they defend Cat. I would assume they put Mobley on him, and I think Mobley is just more comfortable defending in the space compared to Allen. I mean, Allen is he accepts the challenge if it's given to him, but Mobley could be a bit of an X factor. And also, if like it does turn into a bit of a shootout, like you have Cat that's rolling, like can you get Mobley rolling? Like he has had nights where he has been red hot from three, and then there's other nights where he'll take a few, doesn't make them, and then kind of looks elsewhere to score on offense. And you wanted to see like, can you match another big man shot for shot? And that's what I'm going to be really looking for in this matchup, just because like he really has emerged as I would say Cleveland's second best player in terms of just the hierarchy, but like he's having like a Carl Anthony Towns type year where Mitchell's just saying, okay, take the ball, do your thing. I want Evan to kind of take these big shots and be comfortable doing it because come playoff time, I want him to be comfortable doing this, especially if defenses are focusing on me. And I think it's going to be an interesting way of how the Knicks handle him on defense and how the Cavs kind of get him rolling on either end of the floor.
All right.
What about you
So,
with the Knicks?
all right. So I'll just recap. You're going with Evan Mobley as your X
Yeah,
factor. Evan
yeah,
Mobley as the X factor. Okay. For me, it's interesting. I'm going with my starting lineup too. I'm going with Mikal Bridges. Okay. Mikal
I
Bridges
like it.
is my X factor because he's going to have the toughest assignment of all assignments on Friday because you don't have one, but you got two guards. And look, Bridges has been taking, the top assignment for every team out there, whether it be Trey Young, whether it be Tyrese Halliburton, he is getting the number one perimeter assignment. So you got two of them, though. You got Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell. I would not be surprised if he switches between either one, depending on who has it going. Okay. I would expect him to start off on Donovan Mitchell first, just to see, like, just to like kind of tame Donovan Mitchell, not make sure that he doesn't get like, you're never going to stop Donovan Mitchell. I'm not
Yeah,
expecting anyone to stop these superstars, but you got to make
got
it
to make
tough,
him
man.
work for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to make him work. And so I'm expecting him defensively to have the biggest assignment in this matchup possible. You not only got Donovan Mitchell, you have Darius Garland. And so he's probably going to be going back and forth between who he has to defend on who is having a hot night. Now, on top of that, he has to get back into a groove offensively. All right. We're going to rely on Cat. We're going to rely on Brunson, but he's also been brought here to be, that guy on some nights where he can elevate to that star level and just say, hey, I got you. Let me get to my mid range. All right. I know I can go start cutting left and right because Cat's going to find me back door. It's okay. And so I need him to get back in the groove because over the last 5 games, not shooting great. You're averaging 37 minutes, but on a night to night basis, for those through those 5 games, you're averaging 13 points, which doesn't sound so bad, but you're shooting on like 48%. Under 30% from downtown. That's got to be the big thing. And you're shooting, you're only getting to the line like 1 time per game and you're shooting under 70%. Mm-hmm. I need him to step up there, man. And offensively, defensively, his stats are not going to show up because he's going to be on the perimeter. He's not going to get a lot of boards. He can facilitate from time to time. But offensively, I need him to just go be that bucket getter when the team needs it, man. And he can be that guy who just is flying around the court, make guys exhausted. So Mikal Bridges is my X factor for that game. You got Evan Mobley because he's got a tough assignment. I'm giving Mikal Bridges because he's got a tough assignment, man. I like the X factors for this matchup, man. I like the X factors for this matchup.
I do too.
Evan, I appreciate you coming through, my man.
Anytime.
Please let the listeners know where they can find you. If you got any work up and coming, we should be on the lookout for.
So, as we had mentioned before, I am Evan Dammerel. I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Cleveland sports scene at large for Right Down Euclid, but it's downeuclid.com. The rights to Right Down Euclid is owned by Fansided. So, if Fansided happens to be listening and you want to sell me the domain, let me know. But either way, just doing on some things on the back end. I'm actually doing a pretty lengthy feature on the WNBA coming back to Cleveland. I don't know if it's really hit New York at all, but the Rockers are coming back to Cleveland after being away for, almost 20 years at this point. They'll be back in 2028, reportedly. But connecting the former players, former coaches, assistants, some of them are head coaches in the WNBA or at college now at the really high levels. And it's just really interesting to see where their journeys were and just the significance of just women's basketball and girls in sports in general, and just what this means for a city who wasn't receptive to it at the time is now getting a second crack at it. And that's something I'm working on in the back end. So keep your eyes peeled for that. It's, a little work in progress, but other than that, no, anytime. I'm always happy to talk Cavs, Knicks. These two teams are like kindred spirits. They're two ships in the night, something, whatever you want to call them. They are so similar in so many different ways. And when they clash, it is always entertaining basketball, no matter, even if you're just a pure hoops fan, it's the most fun. But if you have a dog in this fight, you can understand if you're frustrated on the losing side of things, but you're lying if you didn't have fun while watching it.
There's a budding rivalry over there, okay? There's a budding rivalry. I wouldn't say it's a rivalry yet because we haven't seen enough of each other in the postseason, but there's a budding rivalry there for sure. Hopefully we get that matchup again in the postseason. That'd be just added fun to add to the lore of these two franchises. But Evan, appreciate you as always, my man. Thank you for coming through as always. Make sure to give Evan a follow on X. Make sure to go check out his newsletter. He does a phenomenal job covering Cleveland sports, so make sure to give him that follow. And for all you, make sure to hit that thumbs up button for boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, okay? Make sure to tell a friend about this program. We appreciate every single one of you, especially the franchise channel members, for subscribing and giving us, that hard-earned cash of yours. We truly appreciate it. Shout out to Knicks Nation as always. And hey, for Cleveland matchup, guess what we got going on? We got a watch party. That is right. Go to Slate, okay? Friday night. Go down to Slate, hang out with CP and the rest of Knicks Nation, and go cheer on the New York Knicks as they take on the Cleveland Cavaliers. So make sure to go get your tickets now if you haven't done so already. And hey, before you tap out, make sure to download that app, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Make sure to support our sponsor. All right, everyone. Shout out to all of you, the mods, franchise channel members, Knicks Nation. We'll catch you on the other side. We out.